Hi everybody, my name is Trevor William Viloria and welcome to episode 7 of Wednesdays with Wah. Okay, to start things out, I'll just like to admit that not everyone has good vocabulary or has endless supplies of hugot lines or is verbose. I value brevity and deliberate speech, more than anything. Since if you're familiar with my story, I public speaking wasn't always exactly a strong suit of mine. So I would find ways of saying more with less. And this applies also to the pieces that I write. What you lack in substance, for example, not everyone is clever enough to write, lines that will stick in your head. Not everyone has that certain wow factor. Wow, who got, what you lack maybe in verbosity or substance, you can make up for in style. And I'm going to teach you today that style actually equals substance, at least in poetry. So how can you say more with less? To answer that question, I'd like to say first that poetry is the literature of complete meaning in incomplete form. It is the literature or art of being indirect. Basically, the more indirect you are, and the more you respect the intelligence of your reader, or in this case, listener, and have them arrive at the meaning of your piece themselves, the more impactful the message of the piece is. Because poetry itself is more abstract than portrait. It's it uses a lot more figures of speech and it's a lot denser in meaning. Mas siksik siya, no, compared to let's say a monologue or prose. And even in spoken word, which people say is like a cross between monologue and poetry, which I don't really believe, but sure, whatever, you can call it whatever you want. In spoken word, oftentimes the heaviest and most meaningful parts of a piece are just 7 words or less at a time. Because when you think of your favorite pieces, I doubt that you've memorized the whole thing unless super fan ka talaga of this poet. Usually what will stick out to you is just a tiny part of it. My challenge to myself as a poet and a writer, and to you, those who are watching this, is to try to make the entire piece memorable as a whole. Not by adding more words, therefore more meaning. No. But you add more meaning by shifting things around, even removing some things, because a pause is not silence. Absence is felt. Nothing is not nothing. Nothing is something. So how do you make an entire piece, from its sentence structure to its word choices, its title even, to how blocks of text are changed and rearranged on paper and in your speech patterns? How does all of that contribute to the overarching theme of the piece? Okay, let's find out. Variety is the spice of life, not just in subject matter, because one of the bigger debates, it's the subject of subject matter, basically. How, everything is always about certain topics. It's always about, love or heartbreak or politics. And there are not enough pieces about, certain topics. These arguments make sense to me, at least. I think because I don't believe that a subject becomes stale. It is the way that it is said that makes it stale. There is a way of making a tried and true subject, even though it's old and sobrang gasgas na. There is a way to make it new again, because in the beginning I wrote a lot of love pieces, and the way I tried to stand out was with form and with structure, not just on the written format, but in spoken form as well. This is very hard to talk about in such a short amount of time. I know I've already taken up like 7-8 minutes, but this is a 2-hour lecture if you're gonna allow me to go on, but unfortunately I am not allowed to go that long. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide examples, and what you can do is you can extrapolate from there, how style, structure, and form are approached and taken advantage of to make a piece more impactful and more meaningful and more dense in meaning. Okay, let's start with the structure and form of a piece on paper, because I believe talaga na with the way you write or you type something will dictate the performance. There's nothing wrong with writing paragraphs. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It works for some people. If you're a very imaginative person, you love going on, and then you're with the way you perform, it's like you can almost lull someone to sleep with the sound of your voice. In a good way. I mean, that's great, but for people like me who hate talking for long periods of time. Wow, hypocrite. Beats and pauses are important to me, because the beats, the pregnant pauses, the moments where the audience gasps or laughs with the punchlines, these are important, and these can be predicted and even manipulated with just writing or typing it on the page. If you separate your lines, parang after each line your tendency is to pause. So with the way you're writing, you're already dictating how your diction and how your cadence is going to perform the piece. So I think, for someone like me who doesn't like to practice, even just the act of reading the piece or even typing the piece, that's already a form of practice, because you see how the lines are arranged, and it's not just good on the eyes if you're gonna publish it, but it will also dictate how you perform. Okay, that's very, very important, because the way you read it with your eyes and how your emotions respond to the pace that the poem is presented to you through your eyes is not that different from the way it is presented to your ears when you're listening to spoken word, when you experience a performance. The key to a tight and effective message in a poem is that every pause, every space, every speeding up, slowing down, every tone change, every shift, every rhyme, alliteration, etc. is deliberate. Now, you may call me a hypocrite because my pieces are quite long. My longest piece is nearing 10 minutes. But there is a difference between me and, a lot of other poets. Is in that what I try to do is the reason why it takes me. I am infamous for writing very, very slowly. There are very few times where a first draft of a piece, comes directly from the top of my head. I do a lot of editing. Basically, I edit the piece not just because I want it to be easy on the eyes when I'm reading it, but I want the way that my eyes experience the piece. I want it to be, I want it to influence the way the speech leaves my lips. The poem travels from page to my brain, out through my lips, and into your ears. I'm gonna list examples, basically. Not all of them. There's so many kinds of form and structure and style. Style is something that is inherent in every writer, and it comes out through experience. Okay, so the best way to have your own style is to write a lot. Okay, write and perform a lot in the case of spoken word. The first style I would like to mention is the run-of-the-mill paragraph vomit. Not to throw shade at, poets, certain poets, that use this style. But, I'm not equipped for that kind of thing. These are the pieces that exist as paragraphs, not only on the page, but also with the performance itself. These are the kinds of poems where you're not sure if the poet is stopping to breathe. They could be very good, very good. They don't stutter, they don't trip like I do a lot, and that's great. If you're a very experienced performer, you have a background in elocution and theater, this could work well for you, especially if you love, flowery language. Not everybody can be a Louis Smith or a Michel Manese. Sometimes when I listen to some of the poets who are good but not exactly memorable, they start to sound like carbon copies of each other. With the run-of-the-mill paragraph vomit, I don't really mean that in a bad way. That's just the term I like to use in my head. It's boring. It's not for me. But, if you want to stand out, that is not the way that you want to approach writing a piece. Okay. What you need is, the basics at least: rhythm, rhyme, and performance. Rhythm. These are, your iambs, your trochées, your anapests. Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, diba? There's a reason why poets like Michel Manese and Sarah Kaye have a sort of comforting quality to their voice. It's because of their rhythm. It sounds right. Right? Parang ang ganda pakinggan. That's because they intentionally or unintentionally, if you're a genius, use rhythm, and rhyme. Of course, there are simple and complex rhymes. A great example would be the more modern hip hop influenced style of poetry with very, very dense, very, very intricate rhyming schemes. Rhyming is a simple but very difficult tool to use. It's perhaps the oldest trick in the book, but it's effective, and you should use it if you can. But you don't really need to. Performance naman, this is only if you're able to do it. Because for someone like me, it took me a while to really get used to performing on stage. It was a huge learning curve for me. I was more of a writer than a performer before. Not everyone is as bombastic as Zuela Herrera, who can make you cry with a look. I'm gonna list some more modern examples of form, style, and structure. Okay, this example is what I would like to call the list or countdown poem. These poems are very rigidly structured, but they're very, very, very playful if you really take a look at it, because the structure is not placed there so that the poem looks nice. It's there because the structure itself is able to add more meaning to the words in that structure. The most simple example is just a simple list. It's just listing. Okay, for example, 14 lines from Love Letters or Suicide Notes by Doc Luben. It's just it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's exactly what the title says it is. There may be rises and dips in emotional intensity. There are punchlines. There is unexpected tone shifts. Because he's talking about two wildly different things here. Love letters and suicide notes. But you can see that the list structure works because 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 14. Another type of simple list poem is Patrick Roche's 21. and Countdown by Michel Manese of Words Anonymous. These are a little more playful since they work with a narrative, with Patrick Roche, and an essay when you're talking about Countdown by Michel Manese. The structure is there, but it's very cleverly hidden. Especially in Countdown, because you don't really notice when she counts down from 10 to 1. It's there, but it's so insidious now, it's almost unnoticeable, but it's there to enhance the feeling of escalation or descent. Then here is where the Lisp structure is prominent, and it's played around with very effectively. Rudy Francisco's Scars / To the New Boyfriend. Very popular example. A lot of people would say that this is the first piece that got them into spoken word. Rudy Francisco misleads you into, thinking, oh, this is just a list of things that I want to say to my ex or something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. He plays around with the list structure. He makes the predictable unpredictable, because just when you think it's about to end, it's not. Surprise, surprise. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's like it plays with your expectations. It's like, oh, I want to get off. It's like a roller coaster that has, a huge dip and then nothing. And then just when you think the ride is over, it starts all over again, Then there's 300 Seconds by Abby Orbeta. Here is another example of, a very subtle list structure, because here it's in the form of a recalled narrative. When you're working with temporality, when you're using narrative devices such as years, months, days, weeks, seconds, you instill a passage of time. So the list structure is there to give you a time frame of the events depicted in the piece. And because long distances and long durations of time are more often associated with either safety or home or permanence or suffering, it can mean a lot of things. The sense of temporality instilled in a narrative list form of structure in a poem can be very effective if you use it correct. Then there's here's another example of a playful Lisp poem, Jared Singer's Love. Here it uses a poem masquerading as an instruction manual. Love 1A, love 2B, etc., etc. It sounds like instructions to something. But with the way it's performed, the way it's robotically written and performed, it sounds so methodical, but there's so much, anger and chaotic emotions trapped inside this box. It makes you wonder what would happen if you would set it free. I wrote a love letter to this kind of poem. It's actually called List. What I do with it is I try to combine everything: the simple list structure, the narrative, instilling a sense of, scale of time, kind of list poem, and, playfulness, because I mislead you into thinking, oh, it's another 1 to 10 list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But here I never get past 1, and that was my way of being playful with it and playing with your expectations. Come on, just check it out, because it's very, very effective. And I noticed that it's a very, very popular form, so it may seem really, really gasgas to you, but if you play around with it just right, it becomes very, very, very effective. Figures of speech. There's personification and synecdoche. Basically, one thing masquerading as the other. Hi, Heisenberg. Oh, my cat is okay. Personification. When you're writing a persona poem, for example, when you give love a voice. When Phil Kaye wrote a poem about his computer, how his computer saw him, that's a persona poem. Synecdoche poems are poems where you equate yourself to something that is only a part of you. That's what a synecdoche is. Equating a part to a whole, like an all hands on deck. You're not really referring to hands, but you're referring to hands that belong to people. You're referring to people. I am loved. I am sane enough to function. I am all right. She's not just saying she is all right, she is sane enough to function, but she is these qualities. She is the concept of being all right. She is being sane enough to function. That for me is my favorite example of a synecdoche piece. And of course, I myself, throw my own example into the hat. I wrote a piece called, you guessed it, Synecdoche, that plays around with this concept also. It's a love letter to style, to this kind of style. Okay? And of course, a very, very important, ika nga sa flip top, wordplay and metaphors. Wordplay, references, metaphors and similes. I'll use myself naman as an example. Again, my very, very first piece that, really, for me, established my own style, where I felt that, I have my own thing going on. It's a simile. It's where, I play around with references, almost to the point of parody. The last example I'm going to use is alliteration versus repetition versus parallelism. Okay, these three are very different. Okay, alliteration is a literary device where consecutive words, start with the same sound. My favorite example of this is S is for Lisp by George Watsky. George Watsky was one of my earlier influences. And it's great because nearly the entire piece consists of words that begin with the letter S. Kasi the joke here is that George Watsky has a very noticeable lisp. So the entire piece is, sounds kind of funny if you remember that he has a lisp. Phil Kaye's repetition is an example of, repetition. It's when a certain word or phrase is repeated over and over again in succession or in different parts of the the piece, and they will mean the same thing. They will mean something different each time, or it will mean the same thing but more as each repetition goes on. Another example would be ito na ang huling tula na isusulat ko para sa'yo. Every time Juan Miguel Severo says that, it means a little more than the last, diba? It's not just because his performance, he's angry as the piece goes on. But even if you just read it, just read it, you can feel it gets angrier with each iteration. Parallelism, that's the last one. Parallelism is very difficult. It's a more advanced form of repetition. There are two lines or two blocks of text that look similar in sentence structure. Maybe most of the words are the same, but they're different. It's like playing a game of spot the difference. One is slightly different, but the meaning is really, really different. Basically, the minimal change is an understatement. This is very difficult to do, and it takes a lot of thought. But if you manage to do it, it is so effective. It is not that utilized. Examples I can think of would be Jonel Revistual's yung Nakatayo at yung Nakaupo. Because he talks about two kinds of thieves, magnanakaw. Yung Nakatayo at yung Nakaupo. And the way he talks about these two is very, very similar, but then you realize that he's talking about two different kinds of people. And another more blatant example would be, my own example would be the Baymax poem. The Baymax poem, if you notice, is actually one piece said twice. And when I say it the second time, when it's altered, it has the same structure, but then I replace the words at the end and it becomes completely different. It's very difficult, guys. Try it. It's very challenging but very rewarding. And another example of this is not a poem, but it's actually a one-act play called Huling Ensayo Para Sayo. What it is it's the same script performed twice. And here, the only difference between the first performance and the second performance of the script is the tone, the intonation and the emotion. The first one is happy, and the second one is sad. But the character on stage is saying the exact same thing. There are so many more examples. It's impossible to list all of them. There are letter pieces. There are pieces that blur the line between written and ad-lib, and there are pieces that are just unclassifiable because they're just so creative, like Jared Singer's Silence, where he uses silence, and in the silence, that's where the meaning is. The entire message is written in the things that he doesn't say. And I think that's awesome. I make it a point to play around with form because I think it is very important, because it's not just the words that you use, it's how they are used, it's how they are arranged, it's what you, it's not just what you say, it's also what you don't say. And I'm a little saddened that it's this kind of style is underutilized. A lot of people write in paragraphs. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. If your content is great. But if it's not, how can you, deliver a message in other ways? That's where structure, form, and style come in. The only surefire way, the only two surefire ways is to read/listen to, lots and lots of poetry. Second, write a lot, because the more you write, the more your style comes out. All right. Thank you very much for this very, very, very lengthy Wednesdays with Wa. Once again, I am Trevor William Viloria, and peace out.